and it is Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and 7 p.m. and we are continuing in our Instagram live chats with various celiac disease experts in the field. And tonight we're going to be joined with Stephanie Lowe. She is the owner behind Turn It Teal website. And pardon the headphones. Like, I've heard some people say that I'm too loud or there's feedback. So I'm going to try these headphones, see if that helps on the playback. So bear with me. All right. We're going to join with Stephanie now. Oh, wait. Hold on. There we go. It's down by now. But on how to connect people. There we go. Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am glad to be talking to you. Face to face. I can hear you okay.
Okay,
like
good.
Like when
my
I
first
interview.
time with these earphones too. So.
Oh, are they? Oh, you do have them in
Yeah.
too? Okay. Because
Yeah.
I was telling when we were talking earlier today, Michael Frelickstein was wearing his, and I'm like, well, maybe, I don't know. People say I'm too loud, and I'm like, well, I'm loud anyway. I don't know how to fix that. So, so we'll see what happens. So for everyone who's joining us, this is Stephanie Lowe, and she is behind the face and the person behind Turn It Teal. And Stephanie, maybe explain to people. Oops, hold on. There. Elijah's Echo is joining us. I have never met them. Have you met them?
I have. I got a chance to meet them last May, I think it was. So
such an amazing story, and
yes. I mean, the family is just amazing, and everything that they're doing is their impact in Elijah's Echo is definitely heard. And out of that tragedy, they have done some absolutely amazing work, and I think of them often in all the stuff that they've managed to do for our community. It's really really beautiful story in the end.
Maybe I should interview them sometime. Although I've never met them, they may be like, "Who are you?" Right. So
I'll put in a good word for you.
Oh, okay, thanks. So for those who are just joining, Stephanie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Turn It Teal is and how all that kind of started?
Sure. So I am a mom to 3 kids, and when my youngest was born, he was not a good sleeper. He didn't eat super well, and we really didn't have, he was our first, so we didn't know that this wasn't just a typical baby thing that they do. So we didn't really have any other point of reference, and I would tell people what was going on, and I think they thought I was exaggerating, and it can't be that bad. First time parent doesn't know what they got themselves into kind of situation. So at a year old, we decided to introduce dairy, and we did not have good results. He got sick. He was not a very happy baby. So then a few days later, we decided, okay, milk didn't work. Let's try eggs. So we went ahead and gave him some scrambled eggs, and it was even a bigger reaction. It was mostly GI mediated and hives and things like that, and watering eyes and nose. And we were like, this is not normal. So we called the physician, and right away we were able to get a prescription for an epinephrine autoinjector and a referral to an allergist. So that was how we started figuring out. I was nursing when he was a baby, and I figured there was something maybe not right. So I tried to take some different things out of my diet. None of it worked, because when we found out the larger issue, we never got the right combination of allergens removed from my diet to help him. So we went to an allergist when he was about a year and a half by the time we got in, or I'm sorry, almost 13 months when we got into the allergist. And that's when we started with allergy testing and getting a positive diagnosis and a kind of a roadmap of where we needed to go after that with allergies. So that's how we started in the allergy world.
And so you talked about going to the allergist. I think sometimes people are confused on how we test for food allergies. Could you touch on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so food allergies are kind of like celiac in a lot of ways, because there are a lot of times where people don't necessarily go the best route to get that firm diagnosis.
Right.
So like they say, it takes a long time with celiac to get diagnosed. It can be the same with food allergies, because while we had a very immediate reaction and we could trace it directly back to that food, that's first and foremost the hallmark of getting an allergy diagnosis. There are a lot of people that I have seen doing some different blood tests that measure different levels, like IgG levels. I'm speaking of anaphylactic allergies, which are IgE mediated, and those are the ones that can cause an anaphylactic reaction. So it's very important that, just like with celiac, that you get a firm diagnosis. It's just as important with allergies that you go to a board-certified allergist who can do these tests, because it's not as clear-cut as a lot of other testing. So allergy testing can be about 50% false positive. So even if you go to an allergist, if you just get this whole list of foods that they say you're allergic to, or I'm sorry, a doctor, a board-certified allergist shouldn't be doing that broad testing like that. So if you go to an allergist, they can help you not only get the proper testing, but they can also make sure that it's being interpreted right, because that is really important. The story that goes with it is so important to making that diagnosis. So it takes a very knowledgeable practitioner to make sure you take in the blood test results and the skin testing results put together with the clinical history as it presents to your child or yourself. There is adult onset allergies. So it's really important to take all that information to make sure you get the proper diagnosis that's needed. And then you can go ahead and continue with getting an allergy action plan, which is kind of your roadmap if there is an exposure to an allergen, making sure you always have your epinephrine auto-injectors at all times. So that's why you need the allergist, is to make sure you get that correct diagnosis and that you know what you need to do to go down this road from then on.
Right. I know, like we both follow Dr. Stukas on Twitter, and he's talked about, like, people will do this whole panel of stuff and tells them they're allergic to things that they're not allergic to. And then they've spent their life being terrified of something that they shouldn't be. So, we definitely don't want to have people living in additional fear, because it is, I'm sure, very concerning.
And the thing is our first allergist was a board-certified allergist, but was still not as current on the research. So we did panel testing at first, and I kind of laugh now looking back, because we were originally diagnosed with all of the top 8 allergens, which are dairy, egg, peanut, tree nut, wheat, dairy, egg, peanut, tree nut, egg, wheat,
soy,
and shellfish. So originally, they said we were allergic to 7 of the top 8 allergens. The only one he did not clinically test positive for was, do you remember? I might have told you this before. Wheat.
Oh.
Which is, I find, looking back, kind of humorous, because come 3 years later, he's diagnosed with celiac. So even though his allergy testing said, okay, you're allergic to everything but wheat, we ended up kicking wheat and the other gluten-containing grains later down the road anyway. But I think what we also found out too was that along with those 7, they also diagnosed him with citrus and corn allergies. And we think that really it was the peanut, tree nut, dairy, and egg, which he is still allergic to now. He's 13 now. And those, I think, were true allergies. But again, our doctor wasn't as up to date on a lot of the testing information that we have now, to know that blanket testing was not the best route, especially for us, where we had such a long list. So it was really important to search out some other practitioners to make sure we got a better understanding of what we could do. We did some in-office food challenges for a lot of those foods, and we're able to add them back to his diet, which has been amazing. So he can do fish and shellfish, which are some of his favorites. So again, it's really important to have that clinical background and that clinical presentation along with the testing. And the only way to do that is with a board-certified practitioner.
Right. I was just going to ask you about the food challenge, and you already answered that, because I think, again, that's the only way to know. Like, I've had people say to me, like, oh, I took this panel test and it says that I'm allergic to all these foods. I'm like, well, do you have a reaction when you eat that food? Well, no, but the test said, I'm like, well, but what your body does is more important than what a piece of paper says.
That's one of the things that I always hear from different practitioners, is that your body's reaction trumps any test results. So again, there aren't as many false negatives,
right,
as there are false positives. So it needs the doctor needs to have all that information to get that really good diagnosis, and you need to get all that data before you can say, yes, this is what it is and this is how you need to proceed. So again, we were eating citrus fine before, he was eating corn fine before, but then we left the office and I felt like, okay, we have to change everything out now and start from scratch with all of that removed. So again, having that taken away, also now in light of the early introduction guidelines, it's totally counter to what we should be doing now with introducing foods to children. So taking those out of his diet was actually could have been more detrimental because of the early introduction guidelines. So
and we all do. We can only do what we know at the time, right?
Exactly.
So because, this is Food Allergy Awareness Week for those who may not know. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you this week. And, but again, as you said, your son not only has food allergies, but also celiac disease. I'm like talking with my hands, but you can't actually see it.
I'm interpreting, so.
You are? Okay, good. So tell us a little bit about, I don't know, maybe how those compare, and like maybe what led him to get diagnosed with celiac, how you knew that it wasn't another food allergy, that you kind of knew that something else was going on, I guess is my question.
So actually, it's such a convoluted story, and we live in Cleveland, Ohio. We have not a lot of sun every year. So my husband was actually listening to NPR, and they were talking about vitamin D deficiency and things like that. And so our son was going in for food allergy testing, just regular routine food allergy testing with our doctor. And my husband was like, if we're taking him in and they're going to have to do a blood draw anyway, why don't we get his vitamin D level tested? So we asked the doctor, and the doctor said, oh yeah, that's legit. You live in Cleveland. We get it. So sure, we'll do that as well. So we were really surprised because we got a call about, 7 days later or whatever it was. And they said that he had a vitamin D level of 0. And we were like, oh, okay.
How is that even possible?
Yeah. So they said and that's what they said. They were like, well, there's a possibility it could be an off reading, but let's just send you to a endocrinologist because they would deal with that kind of stuff. So we went to an endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist said, there's something's going on, and we don't exactly know what it is. One of the things that it could be is a malabsorption issue. One of the things with malabsorption is celiac disease. So she ran a few different tests, and the celiac disease panel was one of those. Wow. So with that, it came back with his TTG and all those levels elevated. So then she said, okay, you need to go to GI. So then we started going to the gastroenterologist. And actually, we found yesterday, I came up with my Facebook memories. Yesterday, it was 10 years ago yesterday that he had his endoscopy for biopsy for celiac disease. So the GI, obviously, we went to the GI, and that GI, I wasn't comfortable with biopsying right away because he was 3 years old at the time. So we did get a second opinion. Second opinion said the same thing. I concur with that doctor. They did I think the second doctor did do the genetic testing as well, which we know, again, is just a tool. It's not gold standard diagnosis. So at that point, we felt comfortable with the second opinion and went ahead and did the biopsy. And it did come back that it was positive. So at that point, I gave myself a little wiggle room. I said, I'd like to have all the gluten out of his diet within 6 weeks, hopefully, because we had to cross-reference all of the gluten-free options now with his list of food allergies. So I gave myself a timeline saying, every week I wanted to find one major staple that was safe that we could transition to. So I think I originally gave myself 6 weeks. I got the staples figured out in about 3 weeks. So then from that point on, he's been gluten-free since.
Wow, that's amazing. And how
because of a vitamin D level.
That's really interesting because, like, for me, my celiac disease diagnosis was low iron, which is very common, but it's interesting when doctors don't know that that's common. You know what I mean? I mean, you and I have talked enough times. We're like, how is it the doctors don't know this? How is it that we know more than doctors? So that's really interesting. And again, like, I have low vitamin D too. Actually, I'm supposed to take supplements, and I haven't been, so I should probably get on that. They're in the cupboard. But yeah, I give everything that happened in February with my dad, I kind of give myself a pass, and I need to catch up on stuff.
It's been quite a year.
It has, hasn't it? So how did your son, so 10 years, and you said he's 14 now, so he was 4?
He's 13, yeah.
13.
He was 3.
Wow. So how did he handle that transition? Like, I think, like, 3, like, you kind of almost don't know. I mean, you do know, but you don't know.
Right. So the day before his biopsy, we got him his favorite pizza from a regular pizza from a local shop, and he ate almost the whole. It was a small pizza, but he still ate almost all of it because we said, okay, this is kind of his last hurrah with the gluten-containing food, and we switched everything over. Like I said, I gave myself a little bit of a grace period to get everything switched out while I was researching the finding safe options, and for him, it was not really any different because we controlled his whole diet. So he was still at home. He wasn't in daycare. He wasn't in preschool yet. So we had total control over his diet. It wasn't a big deal for him because I made sure I did my legwork and I had, I want pancakes for breakfast. Well, I found a safe pancake. I want a bread for this. I found safe bread. I wanted crackers for a snack. We found safe crackers. So I have a friend, very good friend, who has a daughter who was eventually diagnosed much later. And the difference between the transition for us versus them, it was night and day. And I think I always look for the silver lining. And I think with the celiac diagnosis, first off, we caught it so early. I mean, he was 3. That is huge to catch it that early. They say 7 years for a diagnosis typically?
6 to 10. 6 to 10.
Okay. So the fact that we got the blood test, it came back, we went through 2 different doctors and got a diagnosis all within the matter of a couple months at the age of 3 is pretty amazing. So we are so lucky and so fortunate that he was diagnosed so young. One of the other silver linings is he doesn't know any different. It's always been. It's not really been an adjustment. There are other adjustments that he's had to make as he's gotten older, but they're not the huge, earth-shattering, major dietary overhaul that a lot of people have to go through. And it is. It's a challenge. It was a challenge for me doing the research and everything, but that was on me. On him, we were able to roll from one end to the other. So I do think that was huge for us. Like I said, the early diagnosis, and also he was so young that it just has always been for him. So as far as he can remember.
And I just want to say, and for those chiming in, we're talking with Stephanie Lowe from Turn It Teal. So tell me about turnitteal.org and the list. Talk about what Turn It Teal, your initiative, if you will.
Yeah, so 7 years ago, I was driving through my hometown of Cleveland, like I said earlier, and our biggest building, the terminal tower, was lit for some color. And I think I later looked up and I found out it was for epilepsy awareness, I believe. So I thought, okay, well, I'll see if they might be able to do it for food allergy awareness. And I sent in the application and they said yes. And we had our first building lit in Cleveland, and there was only one that year. So the next year I approached a few other landmarks, one being Niagara Falls, and there was a bridge in upstate New York. So that second year, there were 3 sites that turned teal during Food Allergy Awareness Week, which is always the week after Mother's Day. So from the Sunday, it starts the Sunday of Mother's Day. So we went from 1 to 3, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And we had friends from all over the world helping. We were able to get to Australia, Dubai, Guam this year. And then finally last year we got a few in the UK, which I was really pushing for because I feel like now we've kind of circled the globe and had been adding more and more each year. Obviously this year things are a little different. I didn't feel comfortable going to sites to ask them to do anything above and beyond what they were already doing because of the pandemic. I didn't want to put any more pressure on anyone. So once I realized where things were going, I said, okay, from now on, we're going to go ahead and scale. We're not going to ask any more. We still do have a list of about 15 different sites here in the US and Canada and Australia, like I said, Guam this year, that will be lighting up for Food Allergy Awareness Week. Sometime during this week, there's a list at turnitteal.org. So those are, I keep them updated because sometimes things do come up that they have to adjust their schedules. And this year too, what we're doing instead is having a logo contest. So people can submit a logo of what they think our logo should look like, their interpretation of our logo, and people can go ahead and send those in. I know Elijah's Echo sent one in, Ms. Word, they sent one in too. So people can send those in until the 15th. They can send those to info@turnitteal.org. And then my kids are going to be the judges, and we have some great prizes that we're going to be sending out. So everybody can kind of get in on the fun in a different way this year because everything's a little different this year. So that's what we're up to.
If you could give, especially parents who are new to this food allergy diagnosis, again, dealing with testing and EpiPens, and it can be, like you said, probably really overwhelming. I'm sure it was overwhelming at first. If you could give like 1 or 2 tips to help them, I don't know if I'd say ease into it, because it's not easy, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, to kind of help them get over the rapids, I guess.
So it's all about baby steps. I've said this a lot of different times that it is really all about baby steps. I think that's with everything when it comes to parenting. I remember the first time we tried to leave the house when he was a week old. I was just going to my mom's, which is a 15-minute drive. And we stopped 3 times between our house and my mom's house because he was crying, or was he okay? Was he comfortable? Is this wrong? Is that wrong? Do we need to change him? So it's kind of the same thing when you're adjusting to your new normal. So it's all about baby steps. We didn't, the first time we went to a museum after he was diagnosed, making sure we had extra snacks and making sure we kept an eye on him a little closer, things going in mouths when they're babies and things. So we managed that half-day trip. And then, okay, we're going a little further. We're going to be gone the whole day. So now we need to have snacks and breakfast and lunch and EpiPens. And then, okay, maybe we're going to go for an overnight. So you just keep building on that knowledge. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say is make sure that the information that you're getting is really good, solid data. You need to make sure you're looking at reputable sources. You need to be looking at people like Dr. Dave and, FACT and people like that, the organizations who are really doing the legwork and the research, and really the ones that are making sure that kids with food allergies. That was one of the first places I went when we started, because it is so important to get really good data. You hear and see a lot of things on the internet, like we were talking about earlier with testing and things like that. And it can really lead down tragic rabbit holes and can really end up putting you in a place of fear. And none of us want to live in fear. We want to come from a place of education and knowledge and become empowered. And it's so important because we need to pass that along to our kids. Because, and again, I'm speaking as the parent of a child with food allergies. So I don't personally know how this works for him. You know, we try to talk about it and have a really good open communication about what's going on. So we want to make sure that we are empowered as parents so that they can be empowered when they're getting older. And that's so important. I need him to be able to speak up. I need for him to understand what his limitations are, which aren't many. You know, we've managed lots, you know, with the good education and the good knowledge that he has, that I feel comfortable sending him out into the world that doesn't necessarily always understand what is going on and why he has to say no and why he'll pass up donuts on donut day at school. He needs to feel comfortable with it. He needs to be ready. And I cannot prepare him for that road if I don't have the good information. So Elijah Echo's another one. You know, there's just so many really good places to get that advice from, but you need to make sure that it's good scientific advice, like anything health related. You know, don't take a blogger's word for it. Look for that good solid data. I always say my blog, it's a personal experience blog. It isn't a medical blog. I'm not providing medical information at all. It's so important to go to those resources that do have that really solid data and advice for you.
And I try to say the same thing about my blog. Like, I have celiac disease. This is my experience. These are the doctors or resources I trust. This is who I would recommend you to. So yeah. And again, like, I think it's important. Like, if you feel empowered and you empower your son, like he's going to go to high school and in college, if that's what he wants to do, he's going to become an adult. I know he's going to become an adult. And he's going, you can't always be right next to him. And so helping him, I don't know if you saw our chat with Jerry Ann last week, and she talked about role playing and helping kids feel comfortable and speaking up for themselves.
Absolutely. It's so important because you're right. You're not always going to be there. And I think that I'm definitely a more cautious person generally. I think that's the other thing to be really cognizant of is that they pick up on that stuff. So if you're really, you know, I've seen this where if the parent is really uptight and just can't handle that anxiety, that does get transferred onto the kid. I've said before, I always like to pretend I'm a duck. So when he sees me, I'm just a duck. I'm swimming along. But and I look like I'm just like floating around. We're all good. And underneath the surface, I'm paddling away like crazy to try and keep myself afloat. And I always say, I don't want him to see that paddling like crazy. I want him to see, okay, we've got this. You know, we're good. We're going to manage this, and we'll do what we have to do that. I don't need to see him to see the paddling way. So it's so important too that we keep our own
composure
in check, right? And if you do, I mean, it is anxiety causing, and if you need resources, somebody to talk to, that's so important because it can become debilitating. The anxiety that can come with it can definitely be debilitating. So it's really important to keep that in check as well and make sure that you're not exhibiting that anxiety onto them, because then that's going to make them be much more fearful and maybe not want to branch out as much as they could and soar as far as they can with that empowerment again.
Yeah, and Elijah's Echo saying, I know the feeling. And I'm like, well, for those of you who don't know Elijah's Echo, you need to check out their story. But unfortunately, their youngest son,
older son.
older son,
Yes.
passed away from food allergies, was accidentally given Elijah was given his allergy at preschool, and unfortunately died. So I'm like, if anybody's earned the right to be anxious, it's them. So, but I mean, but again, to see, for those of you who don't know their story, now in New York where they live, like all preschools have to have food allergy training, which is one, shocking that they didn't already. I mean, for real, like how could they not already be doing this?
I did misspeak. It is their young.
Yeah. He corrected me.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, sorry.
Or she. I'm not sure who's doing the Instagram, if it's him or the husband or the wife. Sure. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that you'd say about food allergies that have, because for example, like I know with celiac disease, I can say I've been diagnosed almost 20 years, and it does get easier. Like, are there any things that you've seen improvements in the food allergy world that you can say, wow, when we first started, we were here, but now look how far we've come? Do you have any stories like that?
So I think there definitely have been a lot of advances with food allergies, and there's still always room for improvement. Like, I think one of the big things, I'm sure you'll agree, is with the product availability.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we were not in the time we are now, as far as procuring groceries, that with the state of the world right now, the availability of food options that we can have now are so, and again, for us, it's been 13 years. So I'm sure you've seen tons of leaps in the availability of different products and things that are safe for us that I'm sure even when we started weren't available. Like, I would have never thought when he was younger, that I would be able to go to someplace as amazing as some of these bakeries that we've been able to go to that do cater to people like us. And I hate to say it, but sometimes our vacations are really geared towards, where can we go to a really good bakery? So
same, sweetheart, same. And someone was just mentioning too, would run a lot, talking about sesame labeling is on the horizon, which I think is so important.
Yes.
And again, to tie this to the UK, like the UK labels for the top 14, they're way ahead of where we are.
Yes, for sure.
So, and adding that sesame and them understanding is like you said, baby steps and small steps to make it safer for everybody.
For sure. And I think that in dream world, every label would have every ingredient every time, and there wouldn't be mix-ups, and there wouldn't be issues, and people would learn and know and understand. But again, if we don't have the patience and the knowledge to impart to others, then we're just going to shoot ourselves in the foot. We need to do that education. And I know it can be rough. As an advocate, you say the same things a lot. And it can be, there are days where you're like, I don't want to answer again what we do eat at home. I'm sure that's one of the big ones. Well, what do you eat? Well, we eat a lot. I mean, I if you look over my Instagram page, you'll see, like, we eat a lot here. And
tamales.
Oh my gosh, I love tamales. Heart tamales. I'm so excited this week.
I'm so impressed with you.
I'll admit that one was all for me. I love tamales, and I finally said I was going to do it this year, and I finally did. So again, it's a lot of repetition, and we do have to say the same things over and over. This is why, this is what we can't have, and that's okay. And it's okay for there to be days where you don't want to talk about it. It's okay for there to be days where you don't want to advocate. It's okay. And we are all doing the absolute best we can and giving our voice to the cause that we can and trying to impart what we've learned. You know, I didn't become an advocate because I wanted to. I became an advocate because I needed to. And that is what drives me, is to try and help not only my son, but I've seen what can happen afterwards. You know, we have been able to make some changes in schools. We have been able to do things to make it easier for those coming up behind us that are encountering the same situations. And the issue of food allergies and celiac, it's growing. This is not a shrinking population. And also on the other end, these kids are not outgrowing their food allergies as quickly, and they're going off to college. So we need to look at those that have come before us, whose kids are in college or have gone through college and who are changing things at a college level. And there are people in the workforce now. You know, there's people who specifically talk about conferences and how you can work with conferences when you do have food allergic people, so that, and people with celiac, so that you can make sure that you're accommodating these people. And again, that all has happened because of the work that people like you and people that have come before us have all done. So it's really important to just keep going. And again, you can get tired, but take that break, take a 5, and then when you're ready, get back to it.
And talking about those conferences and meetings and stuff, I'll be talking to Tracy Stuckrath next week from Thrive Meetings, and that's her mission, that's her goal.
That's what I was thinking of.
So if anybody else has questions, I mean, we're getting a lot of thumbs up here, and somebody was saying that they really appreciate the Niagara Falls that you do, and so they're going to miss it this year. I can go look at Allergy Mama 333, I think was who said it.
Yeah, yes, again, we just didn't feel comfortable keeping on pushing for things when there's just, everybody's just kind of trying to maintain. So we just didn't feel comfortable. So, but I would love for everybody to send us their interpretation of our logos so they can still be involved. And I know as a parent with 3 kids home right now, even if I can keep them occupied for 10 more minutes a day without fighting, that's worth gold. So think of it that way. It gives them something to do for 10 minutes, and go ahead and send those into us. We'd love to see them.
Right. That is so, I mean, I don't have children, but my husband's a teacher. So as you know, so I'm like, I have plenty of friends who have kids. And so I know that, like, just be nice to each other. Stop fighting.
Right. Right. I've run out of duct tape. So
that's so funny. Well, those are the kind of the end of my questions. I wasn't sure what else to talk about, but I'm just so grateful that you continue to advocate. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Your Chef Ming story, like, and I think that ties into like being afraid and like how your son overcame that. Explain, if you can, give a quick synopsis of what happened there.
So, I'm trying to think of I'm sorry for the how long ago it was. I want to say it was 4 years ago.
4? Wow.
No, 3 years ago. So it started 3 years ago. We were on a quick overnight trip right before the kids went back to school. It was just, we had points so we could get a free hotel room, and we had a membership for the museum here. So we were going to go to a museum in Pittsburgh. It's a quick drive. We figured, okay, this will be a really cheap, really easy way to get away for one last overnight before the kids went back to school. So we went, and I did the research for a place that we could visit for dinner. And I showed my husband the menu because they had a really great allergy disclaimer on the menu. And I showed my husband, and he said, wow, they really get it. They really understand the allergy thing. This is great. I said, okay, great. So we go, and we spent all day at the museum, and we were, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. I heard a beep. So we went to this restaurant to have dinner. And while we were there, we had just ordered drinks. And there were a few minor hiccups as far as who was sitting where. Normally, we have this we have this down pat. We know where he sits. He sits typically between my husband and I because we have 2 younger ones. So that way he doesn't have to worry about somebody touching his food or this or that. So we had this all planned out where he was going to sit, and our usual thing, we don't even talk about it. It's just known. This is how we operate. So unfortunately, it was a sports bar, and my husband, he wanted to watch the baseball game. So we let the two boys sit next to each other so they could see the TV. He ends up getting served my younger one's chocolate milk. Takes a sip. It was a closed cover. Couldn't see through the cup. We didn't think to look. He drank the wrong cup, had an anaphylactic reaction. Got a nice little tour of Pittsburgh via ambulance, went to the children's hospital, and I wanted to run home. As soon as we got home, as soon as we were getting discharged, I wanted to go home. I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be in my bubble. And that's what I wanted to do. And I was talking to my husband. I said, what do we do? This is what I want to do. And he said, okay, but what is that showing him? And I said, you're right. I said, we should really ask him. I mean, this impacted him. We had plans the next day for what we were going to do. So we said to him, what do you want to do? You know, do you want to stay here? Do you want to go home? And he said, how much food do we have? How much safe food do we have? I said, we have safe food for you for probably for 3 days, because I will overpack his food every time. So I always have it. So he said, as long as we have enough safe food and we don't have to eat out again, I want to stay. I said, okay. So I didn't want to. I wanted to run home, but he wanted to stay. So we stayed. So he had enough safe food. Everything was great. We were discharged. I found a pharmacy, picked up another set of EpiPens and some of the medications that we needed after his reaction. We stayed the day. He had a great time. We drove home. He wouldn't eat out after that. It just wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. We tried to reassure him. And at the same time, I'm not going to push him. He was that time 10, so I wasn't going to push him. So we didn't. So that year, Turn It Teal was going to an event in Boston called 31 Nights of Lights, and they do their lightings in December around for the holidays. So we were lucky enough to be chosen as one of the organizations who were going to be there. So I reached out to Chef Ming Tsai, because he is from Boston and he does a ton of work with food allergies. And I've heard amazing things about his restaurants and what they do for those people with food allergies. And Chinese is one of those, you know, any kind of Asian cooking is not one that we would ever attempt because of his allergy between the gluten and the peanuts. And right. It's just not happening. So I reached out to Chef Ming and I was totally shocked. He said he would love to come to the lighting. He helped us flip the switch at the Prudential Center in Boston. It was absolutely amazing. It was definitely one of the highlights for us. So because this was going to be a big deal, we actually took my sons wanted to go. My daughter didn't want to go. So my husband and my sons and I went to Boston and we got to meet Chef. And we kind of told him the story about what happened and how he hasn't eaten out since. So Chef said, okay, well, what are your allergies? And my son listed them off and he said, we can do that easy. And I said, so I looked at my son and I said, so what do you think? Do you want to go? Do you want to try it tomorrow? And he goes, well, I'll have to think about it. So then later that night, I got the information and who I should talk to if he wanted to go. So later that night, he just looks at me and goes, yeah, let's do it. And I was kind of confused because I'm like, we got here really early in the morning. I'm exhausted. What are you talking about? He goes, oh, I want to go to lunch there tomorrow. So the next day we went to Blue Dragon on our way to the airport and we walked in and they had a menu for him. I made sure I took pictures of everything. They highlighted everything that was safe for him and he ate out for the first time. It had been about 6 months at that point since he had eaten out. So really thanks to Chef and his amazing work that he does and his knowledge and his training of his staff and he emphasized to my son, we've got you. And all of that was just so important for him to hear from somebody like that. And we were able to go and it's the only time he's ever had Asian food out. And it was an amazing experience and just so much fun. And it was really quite a hurdle that we got over that day. So then we were able to ease back in other places then when we got home. So it was another really special occasion that ended up helping, the Turn It Teal project actually helped us, overcome that. So it was wonderful.
I definitely loved watching. Because I remember watching and, we've been talking for years and, so I followed all that happen. I just think that's so great how that how Stephanie was able to give him kind of his self-confidence back. Like, it's self-confidence in eating out and being, okay, I don't have to be cut off from all these things. I don't know if you saw some of the, I'm trying to get back to the comment here. Someone said they took their daughter to their 504, and that the school asked the child what they wanted and like how empowering that was and why it's so important. So
so we started when he was in 4th grade, taking him to our 504 meetings, and I told him at that point that it was really important that he learns the language that we use in these meetings. He learns what we talk about. And I told him that by the time he goes to high school, I expect to be in the passenger seat. I expect him to be able to manage that meeting, because when it comes down to it, he's the one that knows what he needs. And that's become so much more apparent these last couple of years. I look at him now, and he's starting to look more grown up. And when we actually had a virtual 504 meeting because of schools being out. So we had the meeting this year, and I always make sure I defer to him. If there's any questions, I always make sure he knows that he needs to answer, because it absolutely is his ball game now. And he knows, I'm sure there's kind of one-offs where he might need some guidance. But when we prepare for his 504 meetings, we always make sure he has a copy of it. We go through together and talk about what the accommodations currently are. We talk about if there's a need to kind of increase some of them, or some of them that we can take away, because it is so important for him. And I'm not at the school. I don't know how his day runs. I don't know how it operates. So there may be things that I think are completely normal to ask. And he's looking at me like, do you even understand what goes on in the middle school, Mom? Because I think it's a little different than what you're thinking. So it's really important that he really have that information, because he's the one living with this. So he needs to have that input. So this year, next year, our next 504 meeting is actually going to be his first high school 504. Wow. So I hope he's got it. I've always told him I will always be there to back you up. Mm-hmm. But it's your life, and you're the one that needs to speak up for what you need. So,
and again, it's practice now, because once he gets to college, you're not going to be. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll go to Ohio State or something. He'll be relatively nearby, but for the most part,
he has plans to go to Boston. So we'll see.
All right. Well, that is all I have. If there's any other things you want to say, or if anybody wants to ask a quick question, they can. But again, just to reiterate, we've been talking with Stephanie Lowe from Turn It Teal. You can find our website, turnitteal.org, and she's an advocate for food allergies. And her son also has celiac, so she gets it. She definitely gets it. And I'm just so thankful that you're my friend, and I'm so excited for these talks, because these are all my friends, and I haven't seen you in forever.
I know.
So it's yay! It was funny. I was supposed to talk to Jules Shepard tomorrow, and we had to change it to the following week, and she's got some stuff going on. I'm like, if you're over, if you just want to say no, if you're too overwhelmed. She's like, no. She's like, I want to talk to you. So I'm like, yay! And Elijah says, thank you so much for everything you do, Stephanie. It's phenomenal, they're saying. So.
Well, I am but one voice in a really big sea of advocates who are all fighting for that one goal, and that is to raise the awareness so that everybody does understand. This isn't. We're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to be special. We don't consider ourselves snowflakes. We are just people trying to live our everyday life, and sometimes we just need to be allowed to bring in our own food, or we need to talk to the chef, and that's it. Know how to use an EpiPen. That's all some really great information, just like CPR. People know CPR. People should know how to use an EpiPen. So,
especially if it's an AviQ, it talks you through the whole thing. So,
just
there you go.
Yep. Don't even have to think, just listen to the voice. So
yep, and Hero was saying she's honored to have met you and your family.
Yes.
So
that was on one of our across the border excursions for bakery. So there's 2 bakeries up in and around Toronto and Burlington, Canada. So since we're pretty close, we just hop on up and grab bakery. I've told Hiromi that if you ever see some news report of a crazy family sitting on the side of a bridge, stuffing their face with bakery because the Border Patrol won't let them take it back into the U.S. for some reason, that would be us. Because I'm not going to let this cooler full of amazing bakery go to waste. We will sit on the side of the bridge and eat up all of our gluten, dairy, peanut, tree nut, egg-free yummies before we will let them take it from us.
Heck yeah. I hear you. I'm like, ain't nobody coming between me and my gluten-free baked goods.
No.
Like, nope. Spent too much damn money. Well, I'm going to call it a night and let you get back to your stuff, and hello to your husband and kiddos, and hope you have a great rest of the week. And thank you again for taking time to talk to us this evening and tell your story.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me, and I'm always happy to talk about all things gluten-free and dairy-free and egg-free and allergies and celiac and whatever. And I am also the first to tell you that I definitely know what I don't know, and I'm always happy to point you in the direction of advocates who do know. So that's really important too, as an advocate, is to know and admit what you don't know. So
I so often tell people that I'm like, I kind of feel my job in life is like, I know there's lots of stuff I don't know, but somehow I know the people who do know, and I just connect each other. That's my job.
Yes, same here. So thank you so much for all that you do in the celiac community and your camps and everything else that you do. So thank you so much, and have a great Celiac Awareness Month as well.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yep.